and welcome back to our main stage. How are you all feeling? Tell me in the chat one word that describes how you're feeling this Wednesday afternoon. I know for some of you it's Wednesday evening. I love that there are so many people from so many time zones joining us today for CMX Summit 2020. I'm thrilled to introduce our next speaker here. As you all know, communicating your brand values has never felt more essential than it has this year in 2020. But as more companies adopt this strategy, how can marketers ensure their brand stands apart? For the Washington Post, a brand synonymous with world-class journalism, it starts with the belief that quality journalism is worth paying for. Our next speaker is the CMO at the Washington Post, where she oversees subscription and new product marketing, branding, and business development. She has led the team to drive digital subscription growth by more than 200%, focusing on both subscriber retention and engagement, as well as new subscriber acquisition. In this session, she pulls back the curtain on the Washington Post's branding strategy, delving into the evolution and road ahead as it continues its rapid subscriber growth. Please welcome to the CMX stage, Miki King.
Thanks so much, Beth. I am excited to share with the group today, and I'm so thankful to Bevy and the CMX Summit 2020 team. This is such an important topic that you have convened folks around related to building community. There's never been a more important time to discuss this. I think that bring this to the forefront right now could not be more timely, and I'm so excited to be a part of this lineup of amazing thought leaders. So thanks so much for the opportunity today. You know, over the course of the last 2 days, we have heard great wisdom from the most brilliant minds in community building, helping us to understand what it takes to build, foster, and grow thriving communities. And of course, I bring the perspective of the news industry, which is in some ways ironic because, dare I say, that some of you may be tuned in today because you're trying to get away from the news of the moment. Well, let me assure you, I am certainly not here to opine on the news cycle or anything that is happening right now. And in fact, I will do my best to ensure that the next few minutes are a bit of a break from what you might be seeing in your news feeds and help to do what I think you've been doing over the past couple of days, which is taking a step back and thinking about what this moment means for our businesses. When you think of news organizations or the news media intuitively, one might ask the question, is there a connection between the news and community building? You might think, depending on where you sit, that the news media is either promoting and encouraging community or perhaps quite the opposite. But I would submit to you that news and community are inextricably linked. When you really think about the role of news, for many of us, our local hometown newspaper was the very place where we found our first community's voice. Many local publishers today remain the voice of the community and galvanize the local community in critically important ways. For national news organizations like the Washington Post and many other national and global brands, I believe that building community is about tapping into a set of shared values that the community embraces and relies upon. So, in fact, I want to sort of have you think about not necessarily your opinion about whether or not the news is part of community building, but in fact, really sort of go with me on this journey of thinking about how do we think of the shared values of a community. And what I really want to highlight is that the best brands drive engagement and loyalty by successfully communicating their values as a brand to the communities they wish to serve. So not unlike our calling as humans, our calling as organizations implores us to ask the ever important question, what do we stand for? What do we stand against? and why. And we have seen some brands do this exceptionally well, really making their brand voice and their core values work together seamlessly, so much so that they are essentially one and the same. We've seen Nike over the course of several campaigns, but most recently their anti-racism campaign has done a phenomenal job of bringing their core values as an organization to the forefront. We've seen Peloton do this with the license that give to their trainers to show up as their complete selves and address social issues during class using playlists that exemplify the diversity across the course, across their team of trainers, and really encouraging their trainers to exemplify the organization's goals and the organization's priorities and values around diversity, inclusion, and equity. We've seen Google do this. Google uses the Doodle platform to shine a light on important issues. And by their own account, they are helping to spark conversations about issues that may not otherwise be known or addressed. In 2019, Google used an animated doodle to celebrate 50 years of Pride, depicting the last several decades of LGBTQ activism and policy change. And everything that we know from the Washington Post readers as we study our consumers, our communities, and our audience tells us that what audiences want is transparency from their brands, want to know what their brands stand for, to understand the brand's core values, what drives their decisions, and that will help them as consumers just make decisions about who they support as a brand. The challenge for this as a news organization, as you might imagine, is how do we balance this need that we're hearing from consumers with the need to be objective and to demonstrate that our commitment to our core values is not a political opinion, but one that is about our commitment to our and decency. So what does this look like for the Washington Post? Well, first and foremost, one area where we have been particularly vocal about our values is with respect to press freedom. Over the last 140 years, we have been committed to the notion of press freedom and the idea that an independent press is in fact the cornerstone of our democracy. When Jamal Khashoggi, one of our correspondents, was killed in Saudi Arabia just over 2 years ago, we did not hesitate to speak out publicly about this tragedy and what it meant for journalists all over the world. At the time, our CEO, Fred Ryan, wrote a column speaking out about this tragedy and calling out leaders who were responsible for it. Additionally, we used our own assets, in this case, the column of our newspaper, leaving a blank space where Jamal's column should have been. We thought that was really a powerful way of showing really the world how important it was that we continue to remember the tragedy around Jamal's death and what that meant for the threat to press freedom. In the last 2 years, we have really leaned into this and stepped to the forefront of the conversation around freedom of the press and the rights and protections of journalists. We began a campaign around press freedom in which we partnered with local organizations whose core mission is to advocate for press freedom, CPJ and International Women in Media Foundation, both to support these organizations financially as well as to promote their efforts through our own platforms. Most recently, we partnered with Showtime to produce a documentary on Khashoggi's life at the second anniversary of his death, really just continuing to honor the sacrifice of journalists, because again, that's a core value that we want to continue to bring to our audiences, to those who are following the Washington Post, and ensuring our audiences that this is not an issue that we're going to be walking away from. Beyond press freedom, another core value that we have really tried to focus on in bringing to our audiences is that of our commitment to relentless investigative journalism. And what we mean by this is beyond breaking news, beyond the scoops, or the story of the day that one can literally find anywhere by scrolling through your social media feeds. At our core, we are going beyond the surface and getting to the heart of the story, which is what we believe is essential to our work. And it's the value that we bring to the marketplace and to our readers. One example of this is the story we broke this summer related to the allegations of sexual abuse within the Washington football team franchise, with an individual story, with the first story that broke in July, and then followed by a series of stories that laid bare the full investigation and the depth of the experience of the women who came forward with their story. This idea of the deeply reported investigative journalism, giving voices to these women who would have otherwise not had an opportunity to tell their story, is incredibly important to us as a core value. It is literally one of the reasons we exist, and we think that there is nothing more important than continue to reiterate to our audiences, to our readers, to our subscribers over time how important this is to us as an organization. And really, this you begin to think about, how does this play out from a strategy standpoint? So our goal is to focus on investigative journalism as our core in every communication with our readers, differentiating our value by demonstrating to readers that when it comes to the answers that they're looking for, they can trust us to ask the tough questions and bring them the full story. What does that mean? We've shifted our approach from leading with price promotions and rather using our commercial marketing efforts as another means of getting our content in front of readers and demonstrating that our investigative journalism is at the core of our brand. And what we have found is that time and time again, when we engage readers in our content, selling them not just on a subscription because it's a lower price or because they can cancel anytime, but what they're getting is unlimited access to our investigative journalism and our commitment to stay on the case, to hold power up to account. When we remind readers of that, this approach far outperforms all other marketing strategies that we have ever undertaken. And when we make it clear that our stories are our exclusives, again, the deep dive investigative journalism that is at our core, the results are even more promising. We do not often share numbers publicly, and you know this if you are following media news at all. But I thought it was really important to share some data that helps exemplify this point. You know, we've spent a great deal of time. We're always testing, always learning, always trying to understand from our readers what A, they most want from us, and B, what helps them to find the kind of value that they are willing to pay for in journalism. And we did a series of email marketing tests in recent months, and we saw that paywall conversion rates, and for those of you who are not in paid digital media, that is, when I talk about conversion rates, we're really talking about the people, the number of people who come to the Washington Post site, hit a paywall, and make a decision to subscribe. Our paywall conversion rates were much higher from content forward email messages than they were from email or any other alert source, like a breaking news alert that you may get on your phone, something like the headline of a newsletter. We found that when we led with content time and time again, and we led with content forward email that highlighted our investigative journalism, we had the best possible results that we could have hoped for from both a conversion standpoint and every other method, and every other metric. What do I mean by this? This has paid dividends for us. In that particular email marketing test, we saw over 42% increase in open rates from direct response email messages, and we had more than an 11x increase in click-through rates. So this idea of leading with our values, leading with the core of what we are as an organization is not only to do, but what we have found is that it does, in fact, allow us to increase KPIs across every meaningful metric. So in the simplest terms, what is it that we're trying to accomplish as we think about putting our value-based message forward? One, we want to make sure that we are enhancing discovery. So being on the channels and the platforms where readers are. So we've made a point of ensuring that we have a presence on every major platform where our readers are getting news. And you know what those are. You know what some of those social media channels are. You know what some of those news aggregators are. We've made very strategic choices about ensuring that where people are looking for news and information that aligns with what they care about, the issues that they want to find out, they will find us there. Secondly, we have invested heavily in our product resources to ensure that we help readers to create habits around our products that really help them to understand how our values align with their own. What does that look like when they are reading a story about something that they may be interested in, tying that to a newsletter that allows them to sign up to get more of the kind of content that they are most interested in, that really does focus on the values that they think are most important. And then beyond that, conversion. Seeing how our core values connect to their own, readers are compelled to support our journalism and then more likely to pay to subscribe. So this whole conversation around how do we think about connecting readers to their values is something that we really have to do at every stage of the subscriber life cycle. So we are doing this both with respect to the onboarding messaging. So the first messages that a subscriber gets from us when they make the decision to purchase a subscription to the Washington Post, we're reminding them there. We're reminding them as they are making choices about the newsletters and the ongoing communication that they will get from us. We're doing this both on-site and on our platforms off-site, helping them to remember the value that made them purchase. We're continuing to deliver to them over time as they are subscribing with us. So a couple of summary thoughts I want to leave with the group before we begin to take some questions. It's number one, it's never been more important, as you have been hearing across the course of the last several days, to define and amplify our core values as a brand. Your audience or customers value transparency, and they want to know what you stand for. Perhaps most importantly, if you create a vacuum in this area, it may be filled for you. Don't leave your customers and clients guessing about what it is that you stand for. Define your core values, incorporate them into your communications and your brand strategy, and do it constantly. So readers are not having to wonder whether or not they're supporting a brand that aligns with their own values. Secondly, leading with your core values will positively impact your most critical KPIs. Customers will respond when you give them more and not less information about who you are as an organization. Brene Brown, in her most recent book, Dare to Lead, says that it's incredibly important for us to understand the core values of individuals on our teams in order to ensure that they are most productive. And I would expand upon that and say that it is incredibly important for us as organizations to understand what our core values are as an organization and know that we will be more productive and more successful on every level when we have made those core values clear and transparent to our audiences and to our customers. Finally, sharing values fosters community and a sense of purpose. People want to believe that they are supporting a brand that stands for what they believe in, because that makes them feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. And while we are not a nonprofit, nor do we lobby on behalf of any particular cause, we have learned from our research that people support and subscribe to the Washington Post because they believe in and want to support the value of a free press. So being part of a community that does so as a Washington Post subscriber creates an intrinsic value for many of our readers, which we take seriously as an organization and we believe is critical to our success and growth as a business. So I'll leave you with a familiar quote that is really the most succinct summary of what I've shared in the last few minutes, and that is from author Simon Sinek, who says, "People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it." As organizations, we need to understand our why, our core values as an organization, and we need to make those central to our customer and business and marketing strategy. We really believe that is a winning formula. So with that, I believe we have time for a few questions before we wrap this afternoon. Beth?
Hi. Yes, we do.
Hi.
Thank you so much, Miki. I really appreciate seeing a totally different perspective to some of these things that we've been talking about as community professionals for a while. And it's really nice to hear from, a CMO in the C-suite level talk about some of these strategies. So we do have a couple of questions.
Yes, please.
So first of all, let's talk about authenticity and transparency. What is your advice for remaining transparent and authentic without divulging too much information or giving away the farm, so to speak? Is Is it even possible?
Right. Well, yes, I think it absolutely is possible. One of the ways to do that is to really boil down your values to some very simple language. And I do think that working together as a team and coming up with the ways that, those ideas that you believe in, those, I'll use the press freedom example from the Washington Post as one, because that's one where, we might be sitting in a room among colleagues, and we might all have very different ideas around how we might execute and what that might mean to me personally, what that might mean to a colleague personally. But I think but when you look at the big picture, when you look at the big question around press freedom, we can all galvanize around that, and we can all say that that's the core value that we believe in, that we want to make sure that our customers are aware of. So I would encourage folks to think about what's the core value, even before getting into all of the weeds that would cause you to have to sort of peel back too many of the layers and complicate your message. What's the core value that you really want people to know that you stand for? Whatever that is, I think there's a way to build messaging around that allows you to be transparent, allows you to say that this is something that we stand for, but doesn't necessarily put you in the position of having to I think be overly transparent or share more about the company that that wouldn't necessarily be public knowledge.
Right. I think that's great advice. I think that it's a fine balance because you're right. We want to be as authentic and transparent as possible, but everybody understands that there's some things that, you just can't talk about.
We need
So
to
that's
clean
fair.
closer to the chest. Yeah, right.
Exactly. Well, I love the idea of leading with content. And that actually sparked a couple of questions from the audience as well. So Lauren
Yeah.
says, love the numbers on the content first approach. Did you shift your subject line structure as well? Curious if you can share a few top performers.
That is a great question. I don't have in front of me the top performers, but I can answer that question very uh, carefully and say that we always test subject lines in email campaigns. And so we will go out usually with three. So let's say we're sending out, I don't know, a few hundred, thousands, we will start with a smaller set where we will test three subject lines. And then the winner from that is what we apply through the rest of the test or through the rest of the campaign. So, Lauren, that's exactly the right question to ask. And I do think that testing exercise is incredibly important. I will tell you that even in leading with content, we've had mixed reviews with respect to whether or not we include a rate. So there are times when we will say, support investigative journalism, get 1 year for $29. There are times when we will say the title of the story. And so by and large, I think we've had, and it's just, it has honestly just depended. We've had mixed reviews on both, but I think the short answer to your question is always test a headline before you apply it to the full campaign. And I think that doing a two-way test, if even better, if you can do a three-way test and then apply the winner of that test through the remainder of the campaign.
Good advice. I'm sure Lauren is very happy with that answer. We've got another question that is more about that kind of community management side of things. Piper says, I would expect that your platform is inherently appealing to people with strongly held and divisive views. As a result, she also expects maybe there's some trollish behavior that can come about. So she would like to know how much your members are affected by this. If she's wrong, she would just love to hear you talk about it.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And I will say, there is a lot of negativity that we find, that anyone will find if they're on any platform. And what I will say to that is this: I do not think that, for the most part, our community is negatively impacted in terms of their views by that kind of behavior, because the reality is that behavior exhibits itself for exactly what it is, right? Like we all, I think that most members of our community know that kind of behavior when they see it. They know the difference between someone expressing a different view, which I think people by and large welcome when it's done in a respectful way. The difference between that and someone who is being intentionally hurtful and negative in ways that are not productive. So what I love about our community is that I think that we have a relatively good, I think that most people have a really good barometer around those things. And I don't think that, if I may say, trolling behavior changes the behavior of well-intentioned people in our community.
That's so good. Yep, I agree. I think that everybody's open to hearing other people's perspectives. And I would say that
Yeah.
the audience here is no stranger to some of those more negative comments. So I appreciate you sharing with us with that.
Yeah.
Okay, Lena asks, how do you manage different, possibly conflicting strategies between the newsroom and the marketing team? For example, if the editorial team's presence on social media differs from the marketing team's vision?
Lena, that is a phenomenal question. And I will tell you that at the Washington Post, at our core, the newsroom is the product. And my team's job is to market the product. I should say the journalism is the product, which the newsroom creates. My team's goal is really to ensure that the vision of the story, the vision for how it came together, the team of people who worked really hard on it, that's what that's what we are to bring to market. It's really not about my vision. It's not about the marketing team's vision. The marketing team's vision is that lots of people see it and subscribe. And so that is, so I can't say that we are often in conflict. Oftentimes, where the challenge lies is where we are trying to ensure that the communication is as seamless as it can be. Because obviously, and particularly in the environment that we're working in now, we have to ensure that what the newsroom is working on, my team is aware of, so that we're able to promote it. But more often than not, we are in lockstep with the newsroom, because the newsroom is saying, this is the story, that this is the most important story of the hour. This is the most important story of the day. They're promoting it on social media, and we are coming right behind them to boost what it is that they're promoting. So we rarely have a situation where marketing wants to promote something that the newsroom doesn't. We are really taking our cues from the newsroom. Our most important product, our most important, our only product is the journalism. And so our goal is to bring forward sort of the vision of how that should be positioned to the market.
And that makes sense. I think that oftentimes, especially in community, when we're talking about, where we fit in the organization, we do have business goals. We have these business values that we have to be meeting, and we have to just continue to make sure that we're staying true to that ultimate goal. Makes sense.
Yeah. I'll also
Okay.
add to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I will also add to that one of the great privileges that we have at the Washington Post is that we have made a commitment to being a paid news service. And so we, from every level of the organization, every person within the organization understands that we have to bring a level of value to our subscribers. And so the newsroom is very much aware of that. The newsroom is not in the position where they're saying, oh, well, we should make everything free because we want everybody to see it, because we want to drive traffic. We have a newsroom that's committed, as committed as we all are as an organization, to creating a product that people value. They feel like our product aligns with their own, and that they're willing to pay for.
Cool. Great. All right, let's move on to more attendee questions. This is so awesome. Robin asks, how do you balance what content you want available and shared wide with content that you believe would lead to better conversion?
Oh, wow. That was a little bit of what I was just touching on before, right before you asked that question. So I think a great example of this is what we're living through right now with respect to our COVID coverage. So we made the decision, back in February when we began to hear how things were playing out, that we were going to make a certain amount of our coverage free to the public. We wanted to ensure a certain amount of our coverage around coronavirus free to the public. We wanted to ensure that there was a minimal amount of information that you'd be able to get if you just come to the Washington Post site. We created a newsletter that you could sign up for free. Links out from that newsletter to our stories were also free, and we thought it was incredibly important to make a certain amount of coverage related to public health and safety free to the public. We have also done something similar around, usually during hurricane season, we have a couple of major events where we will take the paywall down for coverage of that particular storm. We have made the live blog, what we call our live blog. It's kind of the live quick hits on information around the election, free on our site as well. We have so much information on our site. We believe that making a small portion of that free, one, so that we can serve the public good, allows us to be able to serve the community, also allows us to be in the game with respect to SEO, and ensure that we are actually getting people to our site. And there are going to be people who come to our site and see the free coverage that we have, and perhaps they move on. But by and large, what we have found is that in no case have we made coverage free and it hurt us from a subscription standpoint. So if anything, it has only driven the kind of traffic that leads to greater recirculation, greater paywall hits and conversions over time.
That's really interesting. And that actually segues into a good question here from Josh about retention as well. New user acquisition case seems strong per your presentation. And his question is, has this values-led strategy seen improvements on overall subscriber retention?
That is an excellent question. So I will tell you that what has been most successful for us from a retention standpoint, has been, well, it's a little bit of the rising tide that raises all boats, right? So when you're doing the right thing, you're doing that helps both. We have to believe that that helps both retention as well as acquisition. Now, what's interesting about that is you don't always have the reasons around why people stay with you. We ask questions around why people churn, right? So if you're canceling a subscription, we ask you why you're canceling. And so we've got fairly good data around that. And then when we ask the question around why people stay, well, we get a wide variety of answers, and they are all primarily related to our coverage. So on the one hand, I can say, yes, you're absolutely, the short answer to that question is yes. I think a values-led strategy has allowed us to and continue to improve around retention. The other thing that has impacted that a great deal is we have begun more recently to really focus in on increasing the length of time that a subscriber is with us through more annual offers. That was a huge turning point for us. We've always had an annual offer, but it's only been more recently that we've worked really hard to promote it. We believe that over time, so if you're with us for 12 months, just like any other cycle of an experience, there are going to be ebbs and flows in the news cycle. There are going to be ebbs and flows in, quite frankly, your own interest in the news and perhaps your sentiments around engaging with the news. And what we're seeing is that our annual subscribers are with us for typically have retention rates of typically 30% higher or more at the 13 and 14 month mark. Why? Because we believe that over time, we're able to demonstrate value to them, and they're not making kind of a decision around purchasing every 30 days. Because again, we're not as subject to the ebbs and flows to whatever their financial situations may be. And so having that annual has worked incredibly well for us. And I would say that's been a greater driver of retention than anything else that we've seen. But certainly, I think our growth over time has been a function of that value-based marketing, both improving acquisition as well as retention.
Very interesting. I'd be curious to know how many of your subscribers are super active and open every single email and click every single link, and how many are what we in the community industry called lurkers, who
Right.
maybe don't open every email or don't click every link. Do
Yeah.
you have ballpark
Yeah.
ideas of those
So
numbers?
we've got some interesting data around that. So I would say that in the mid range of about 80-85% of our subscribers engage with us regularly, several times a month, either through our site and our apps and our platforms, or via email. So when you combine the two, somewhere between 85 to 90% of our subscribers are engaging with us on one of those platforms several times in a 30-day period. Did that
Okay.
hopefully that somewhat answered your question?
Absolutely. And I think
Yeah.
that's very high. That's fantastic. And I think that that's
Yeah.
one of the positives of having that paywall. And I
Yes.
will say that in the community industry, we love our lurkers just as much as we love our super
Right.
users. And I'm sure you feel the
Yeah,
same.
we don't mind the lurkers. And the other thing is, the thing about, I think the question we should ask about lurkers is each individual meeting their need through the community? Because if we just use news as an example, if you are getting 10 email messages from the Washington Post across the course of the day because you're getting a newsletter and you're getting a news alert and you're getting something else, and through that you are seeing headlines, and then maybe on the weekend you're diving deep into some of the stories that you didn't have time to read, then I would say that your need is being met. And then even so, on the analytics side, it might not look like you're engaging with us, but if your need is met, then we've in some ways served you just as well as someone who's visiting the site every day.
I love that call out. I think that we always have to remember that it's the person first, it's the reader first, it's the
Yes.
community member first, and we really do
Yes.
just serve them with these programs and these resources. So that's really
Right.
great reminder.
Yeah.
Okay, more questions here. Let's see. Tanya asks, value-led, mission-driven focus will be the future for all businesses. Did you notice any shift in terms of demographics with younger subscribers?
Yes. So we survey our subscribers twice a year, and we are seeing over time a shift to more and more younger subscribers. I will say that it is not growing as quickly as we want it to. So we are working hard at that. So we are seeing a shift, more young subscribers. I would say that by and large, if you look at our subscriber base overall, it is by and large a subscriber base that is older. But we are seeing that shift, and we're doing a lot of things to drive it really proactively. So we're trying to have messaging that appeals to younger audiences. We are working hard. Even some of the assets that I shared with you are really designed to focus more on younger audiences. We're building our Instagram presence. We believe that your younger audiences are more likely to be getting more of their news from Instagram. So we're making a huge investment there. That was a little bit of what I was talking about around discovery. So we are hoping to be in the places where younger audiences are to continue to build out our younger audiences. It's incredibly important to us. We've launched in the past 2 years, almost all of the verticals that we have launched have focused on younger audiences. Many of you may know that we launched the Lily for millennial women just over 2 years ago. We launched By the Way, our travel section that really is primarily Instagram focused. And really, I like to think of it as it's not your grandmother's travel site. It really is about destinations that younger audiences tend to frequent. And it has a voice that is really geared toward younger audiences. We launched Launcher, which coverage that is all focused on the gaming industry just over a year ago. So we are more and more targeting younger audiences, both in terms of the where we show up, as well as the voice and the messaging of our marketing, and then finally with our coverage and the areas and the verticals that we're expanding into.
That's awesome. When you joined us on stage, there were some attendees who said that the Washington Post TikTok is their favorite TikTok. So you've
That's right.
definitely
How could
reached
I have
some
forgotten
people.
to mention TikTok? And Dave Durkin said he is amazing. Yes, that absolutely is true. We have that has also been part of how we're thinking about younger the discoverability and being where younger audiences are.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm sure very fun for your team as well.
Absolutely. Yep. My
All
team and
right,
my
so we've
kids
got
love that.
we've got time for a few more here. Jessica asks a short, sweet question. Who actually writes the headlines and titles? Is it editorial or marketing or newsroom?
I'm assuming she means the headlines and titles of the marketing messaging. I'll try to answer both
Yes.
questions. Okay, so the headlines and titles of all marketing messaging comes from my team. So we do have a copywriter on our team. We also have our director of digital acquisition, who is also a really strong writer. So my team does a lot of copy. We are constantly, and I'm editing copy all the time. I mean, I probably have 4 Slack messages with copy to approve right now. And so our team, the marketing team, by and large, writes the copy. We do have some overlap with the product team, the design team as well. The product and design teams, oftentimes they will come up with a design and it'll have kind of copy included in it, and then we'll work together to make sure that we're comfortable with the copy that they've produced. But by and large, it's the marketing the marketing and product teams together. Um, and then I'll just answer, just in case she was asking about lines with respect to news. That all comes from the newsroom. Our team does not get involved in writing headlines. I will say that if my team is sending out a content forward email message, we do take the liberty to determine things like what I was saying before. So we might lead with the title of the article, or we might lead with something like support investigative journalism. So something like a subject line on an email or something along those lines my team would manage.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Miki. This has been such a pleasure, and I'm thrilled that we got to answer so many questions from the audience. I know everyone's probably stoked to hear from you. So thank you so much for making some time for us at CMX Summit.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.